The movie opens in Seoul, where we meet our protagonist, In-chang, a member of the military's explosives disposal team. His unit is currently dismantling unexploded ordnance found at a construction site from the Korean War. In-chang is overjoyed because today is his final day of service before he finally retires from the military. I had to say it. After the bomb is discharged, In-chang heads home, and on the way he calls to check on his pregnant wife, Choi. She has just returned from a regular checkup at a hospital and assures him that everything went well. In-chang wants to know about the baby's gender, but she refuses to tell him and asks him to come home first. Moments later, a massive earthquake strikes, and news spreads that Mount Baekdu, located near the China-North Korea border, has violently erupted. The tremors reach as far as Seoul, where the ground shakes violently and buildings begin to collapse. Countless people meet a terrible fate in the chaos, but In-chang is determined to reach his wife. He narrowly escapes the falling debris but crashes at the last moment. He begins running away when a massive structure collapses right above him, but he miraculously manages to avoid it. He needs to know if his baby is okay. Elsewhere, we meet a woman named Jen, the Senior Secretary of Civil Affairs, who visits a man named Professor Kong. It turns out the man is a scientist who had long been predicting such an explosion. Now, after years of being mocked for his theories, he is preparing to leave South Korea and travel to the United States, where he holds citizenship. Jen now asks for his help in dealing with the current disaster, but Kong refuses and tries to walk away. However, when Jen brings up his shady past and threatens to have him arrested, the man has no choice but to comply. Please don't tell anyone about the shake weight ads. Later, Professor Kong meets with high-ranking officials and explains that Mount Baekdu has 4 magma chambers beneath it. The recent eruption was just the first, and 3 more are expected. The final eruption could be so massive that it would devastate roughly half of the Korean Peninsula. To stop the 4th explosion, Kong suggests setting off a blast in a nearby mine with the force of 6 nuclear warheads to relieve some of the pressure. He explains that the lava's force could be reduced by drilling a passage into the magma chamber to let it flow safely underground. But creating such a passage would require an enormous amount of energy. Upon hearing this, the high-ranking officials are horrified and refuse to proceed, fearing that if America were to find out, it could spark another war. However, later, the South Korean president privately summons Professor Kong to his office and urges him to go ahead with the mission, even if the chances of success are slim. The plan involves ignoring U.S. denuclearization efforts, entering North Korean territory, and detonating a nuclear device near the Chinese border. After some time, In-chang receives a call from the colonel, who assigns him the task of going to North Korea for bomb disposal. He initially refuses since he's already retired, but the colonel reminds him that the mission concerns the future of their nation and offers to secure his wife a spot on a U.S. military transport plane for evacuation. In-chang reluctantly agrees on the condition that his baby is a boy and returns home to tell his wife that he has been called for another mission. He doesn't reveal that it's in North Korea, so she won't get worried. In-chang asks again about their baby's gender, but she just asks him to come back early so he can meet their child in person. The next day, In-chang and his team meet with the officials and learn that North Korea still possesses 6 long-range nuclear missiles that have not been dismantled. The plan divides the team into 2 groups. In-chang's team will dismantle the missile, and a separate special operations unit will handle the rest of the operation, including transport and detonation. They also learn about a North Korean informant, Jun-pyong, who knows the missile's location but is now imprisoned in his country. Fortunately, South Korea has implanted him with a GPS tracker, so the team must free him, secure the uranium, and set the bomb to detonate inside the mines. In the next scene, the plan finally goes into action, and the 2 teams take off in a transport plane. However, a large amount of volcanic ash fills the air, and soon the transport plane carrying the Special Forces team breaks down. In-chang's unit is also about to crash, so all of them parachute into North Korea. Upon landing safely, they are shocked to realize that the Special Forces team did not survive, which means it's now up to In-chang's squad to carry out the entire mission. With no other choice, In-chang leads his team, and they soon arrive at the prison where Jun-pyong is held and discover that a riot has broken out due to the earthquake. Fortunately, the prisoners have already killed all the guards, allowing the group to reach Jun-pyong without resistance. They explain the mission to him, but Jun-pyong mocks them, saying that they're just novices with no combat skills. Despite this, the team needs his help, so they free him and keep him in handcuffs so that he won't escape. Next, they let him take a shower and clean up a bit. Good luck scrubbing, but with them cuffs. During this, we notice that Jun-pyong has stolen In-chang's wallet. He notices the ultrasound picture of the child there and also a map of the mines. The cunning man quickly memorizes the map, after which he tears it up and eats it. Next, the team moves forward and soon passes a collapsed statue of North Korea's leader. Jun-pyong feels bad and says he used to look at the statue every day from his apartment before he was imprisoned. Soon, In-chang realizes that his wallet is missing. Jun-pyong hands it back and says that he ate the map but has memorized it as insurance. This enrages a young soldier who angrily throws a punch at the cunning man before being restrained by his colleagues. Regardless, the group continues moving forward, and Jun-pyong soon needs to stop for a bathroom break. He is led outside while being monitored by the man who attacked him earlier. During this, Jun-pyong somehow manages to unlock his handcuffs and attacks the man before running away. Soon, the rest of the team arrives and is horrified to see their comrade unconscious while Jun-pyong has escaped, leaving the GPS behind. Frustrated, the group returns to the city to find him. When In-chang notices the fallen statue of North Korea's leader, he recalls how Jun-pyong said it was a nice view from his apartment and spots a nearby building where he must be. Elsewhere, Jun-pyong has indeed returned home, where he changes his clothes and gathers his hidden guns. He finds his wife high on drugs and asks her where their daughter is. She responds that she is at her brother's place in Pocheon, which is near Mount Baekdu. Jun-pyong then asks if it was she who ratted him out to the authorities, which she confirms. Enraged, he fires a shot in the air, which is soon heard by In-chang and his team outside. They quickly arrive at the apartment and find Jun-pyong pointing a gun at his wife. In the end, the man cannot bring himself to kill her and is detained by In-chang's team. Following this, In-chang views him as a traitor and doesn't allow him to participate in the strategy meeting, but Jun-pyong finds his lack of planning experience laughable. He then eventually leads the team to the nuclear weapons storage site. There, North Korean soldiers lie in wait at a military base hidden beneath a camouflaged factory. But the team bravely fights and manages to subdue them. They then approach a container and, inside it, they find an elevator. After Jun-pyong inputs the password, they descend miles underground to reach the nuclear warheads. They secure Jun-pyong to a railing, put on their specialized suits, and start dismantling the missiles. But once the uranium is secured in their custom detonator, a second earthquake strikes and the ground begins to shake violently. Amid the chaos, Jun-pyong manages to escape on his own and contacts his Chinese associate, who offers him and his daughter refuge in the country in exchange for the bomb. However, the associate also insists he bring a technician who can disarm the detonator. This leaves Jun-pyong with no choice but to return to where Captain In-chang and his team are trapped and help them. Back in Seoul, Choi feels the tremors of the earthquake and quickly packs to head for the military base. She soon gets stuck in traffic on a bridge, where a massive tsunami hits, causing her to be swept into the water. But she manages to swim through the current and eventually reaches safety. Meanwhile, Professor Kang meets with Jen and reveals that their initial eruption estimates were wrong. The large iron ore deposit in the 7th mine is accelerating the eruption, and he suggests targeting a weak point there to prevent the final catastrophic explosion. Back in North Korea, In-chang and his team are about to leave when all of a sudden they are attacked by unfamiliar people who open fire relentlessly. Amid the chaos, they realize the attackers are using heat detection. So, In-chang blows up a truck and sets it on fire to mask their heat signatures and tries to escape. They are soon shocked to discover that it is actually the US military attacking them. Several soldiers are injured, and In-chang and Jun-pyong are separated from the rest of the group. As the two men get in a military vehicle to flee, Jun-pyong shockingly betrays In-chang by tossing him. Meanwhile, in South Korea, the US military shuts down the mission, as crossing borders and stealing nuclear weapons has violated the peace treaty and could trigger a war. Professor Kang thus decides to leave, while Jin tries to persuade him to stay, knowing that if he abandons the operation, South Korea will face serious danger. However, Kang insists there's nothing he can do and ultimately departs. Later, Kang boards a bus to the evacuation base, where he meets Choi along the way. She is crying, so he comforts her and gives her a handkerchief. Fortunately, he never used that one back when he was predicting his own little Mount Baekdu would erupt. They talk for a while, and he learns that she is In-chang's wife and is hoping her husband will meet her at the evacuation point. This makes Kang feel bad, but he doesn't say anything to her about her husband's mission. On the other hand, we see that Jun-pyong has handcuffed In-chang and plans to take him and the bomb to hand over to the Chinese. He reveals that they are heading to Pocheon near Mount Baekdu, where his daughter Sun-oh is. At one point, Jun-pyong stops the vehicle to relieve himself, and during this time, In-chang manages to break free from his handcuffs. When Jun-pyong tries to restrain elsewhere, Jun-pyong finally reaches Pocheon and finds his daughter, who is in a dire state. She is traumatized from everything she has endured and, worst of all, doesn't even recognize him. This overwhelms Jun-pyong with emotion, and he begins to cry just as the Chinese associates arrive, demanding the bomb. Jun-pyong reveals that he doesn't have it and pleads with them to at least let his daughter cross the border. But this only enrages the Chinese, who immediately shoot him. Before they can hurt anyone further, suddenly the US military also arrives, and intense gunfire ensues between them. Amid the chaos, In-chang suddenly appears like a hero, holding a white cloth as a sign of surrender. He then reveals that he has the bomb, but shockingly shows them that the timer on the bomb has already been set. He explains that he timed it to coincide with the fourth explosion, as everything will end then anyway. Terrified, both the Americans and the Chinese finally run away from there in fear to avoid the explosion. Following this, In-chang decides to go to the mine alone and urges everyone else to leave immediately. However, Jun-pyong refuses to give him the location, insisting that he will go along with him. The rest of the team leaves with Sun-oh, who sheds tears as she watches her father depart. Before heading to the tunnel, In-chang calls his wife, who is worried sick about him. He apologizes for lying to her, and she asks him not to be late so he can meet their baby in person. In-chang promises her and tearfully ends the call. Choi, equally distraught, suddenly begins having contractions even though she is still not due. This panics Professor Kang and Jin, who rush her to the hospital. After much struggle, the two men finally reach the correct tunnel and make their way through the mine. They need to take the elevator down to the tunnel and set the detonator, but the lift stops working due to a power outage caused by a volcanic earthquake. In-chang decides to cut the cable and descend with the bomb, ready to risk his life in the line of duty. He then finally tells Jun-pyong the ending of Demo, in which everyone dies. Jun-pyong is stunned to hear this but reveals that his claim of knowing the baby's gender was just a bluff. He then tells In-chang to stay alive and find out his child's gender in person. In a shocking turn, Jun-pyong suddenly steps onto the lift and closes the door, choosing to descend alone. In-chang tries to stop him, but Jun-pyong shows that he's badly hurt and claims no one will miss him anyway. He only pleads with In-chang to take care of his daughter since he's the only person he trusts. With that, Jun-pyong says his final goodbye and uses the last of his strength to carry the bomb to its destination. Next, In-chang is left distraught as he drives away from Mount Baekdu, and moments later, the uranium bomb detonates while Jun-pyong is killed in the blast. The explosion successfully stops the earthquakes, saving countless lives across the Korean Peninsula. Choi, on the other hand, safely gives birth in a hospital. The scene then cuts to a year later, where North and South Korea work together to oversee the reconstruction of the peninsula. Professor Kang returns to Korea from the US and is greeted by Jin at the airport. It turns out that he has finally decided to settle in his homeland and is tasked with promoting a renewable energy project using magma from Mount Baekdu. Meanwhile, at In-chang's home, we see the couple living happily with their toddler and their adopted daughter, Sun, and we will never discover the baby's gender.